Peace and blessings, greetings. Let's discuss why black lives don't matter. But in order for us to understand why black lives don't matter, we must first look at how America began. We must venture back into the past and look at some of the events that occurred whereby the common notions of racism and xenophobia were embedded in the theology and the harmony and the feeling of the nation, which these beliefs and ideologies still persist today. And I would say they are vehement, they are ubiquitous, and they are in almost every aspect of American life. As you know, when the Europeans arrived in the Western Hemisphere, they came with a sword and their Bible. They brought diseases, they committed many atrocities and acts of bloodshed against the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, and then subsequently they went and enslaved Africans. The main reasons for Africans being brought here was to be exploited of their labor, to produce wealth for the Europeans. Now, in the midst of all of this happening, right, there was a particular ideology, there was a particular notion of xenophobia and extreme dislike. And they had to create this idea that the Africans were inferior in order to justify their enslavement and their inhumane, barbarous treatment of African people. So, the origins of this country, as we just discussed, is steeped in genocide, bloodshed, and the destruction of life, not just human life, but plant and animal life as well. We must remember, we're talking about why black lives matter or why black lives do not matter. The very notion of having to say black lives matter means it doesn't matter. For instance, America's a nation of cliches. Aren't you hungry? Just do it. Have it your way. These empty phrases mean nothing. Black lives matter means nothing too. The reason why we say black lives doesn't matter is obvious. Black people are killed every day here in the country, have been killed, and continue to be slaughtered. Take, for example, Mary Turner, a 19-year-old young lady in Valdosta, Georgia. She was killed brutally, defending her husband. She was pregnant. Her child was cut from her abdomen. It fell on the ground and it was stumped, and both of the carcasses were burned. This is a part of American history. This is a part of American history that people fail to discuss, or they may dismiss out of hand. Or a little young man by the name of George Junius Stinney, who's only 12 or 13 years old, and who was taken to the electric chair. He was the youngest person to ever be executed by electrocution. These are some of the atrocities among the many, too many to count, that has happened in this country to prove that black life does not matter. We could move over to present time. We could talk about Amadou Diallo, who was shot over 47 times by police officers on his front doorstep. Or we could talk about Abner Louima, who was sodomized in police custody with a plunger handle. We know about George Floyd and Sandra Bland. These people lost their lives unjustly, and there is no justice for them. So to ask if black lives matter seems to be a silly question, because it's obvious, it's apparent that black lives have little to no worth in this country. When you think about it, America being 5% of the world's population at about 330 million of 7 billion, having the largest prison population, about 25% of the world's prison population. More prisoners are in American jails per capita than any other nation abroad, and most of those people who are incarcerated largely are people of color, particularly black people and Latino people. So we must understand that this is no mistake. Black lives have no value. And again, we know that Africans were brought here and made forced to work and were exploited of their labor. However, today they don't need this labor anymore. So what will they do with African people in this country? What will they do with black lives? You would think that black lives matter because, you know, we go to school, we learn, we're supposedly raised in society, or we live in society, and we're supposed to flourish as other folks. But this is not necessarily the case. Due to the current state we find black life. If we look at the families are in utter ruin, extreme dysfunction. A lot of our homes are led by single parents, mostly women. The men are largely absent. The men, a lot of us, unfortunately, brothers, are incompetent. We are not in our homes. We're not raising our babies. The women are at our heels. There's a lot of distrust, animosity, opposition in the black family, and our children are suffering as a result of this. Why is all of this happening? And we proclaim that Black life matters. This is not to put the blame on brothers and sisters. It's not to put the blame on us. We live in a society that socializes us against ourselves. For example, let's take the word nigger for instance. This is a word that was initially used to degrade us. Other groups of people have words to degrade them as well. You can use a term like wetback or spick or kike. These were terms, derogatory terms, to degrade other people. However, these other folks, these other people, didn't take those terms and embrace them and use them as some kind of term of endearment. However, we as African people have taken a term that was used to degrade our humanity, and for some insane reason, we use it as a term of endearment. This is dangerous. The reason I say this is dangerous because particularly for African people, words are powerful. Words are agents of change. Words are agents of creation. In traditional African cultures, various cultures across the continent don't take this lightly. They understand that the words they use and the language they use creates their reality. It defines who they are as a people. And these words go out into the universe and make their reality what it is. So Caucasians, using a derogatory term such as nigger to degrade our humanity, when we fought against this term, when we refused to use this term as our own, we behaved differently. But if you look and see in history, when we began to embrace this term, particularly with the rise of rap music and now it's called hip hop, when we began to embrace this term, we began to behave exactly as the word is defined. But let's be clear, a nigger ain't black, it's the way you act. However, we're acting out the definition of this term in our everyday lives. We behave accordingly because we've taken this term and we try to use it as our own. This term does not fit our character and our humanity. However, we are making it real. We use it frivolously. We use it without caution, without understanding the implications of using such words that can destroy us. We think that sticks and stones may break our bones and words will never hurt us. That's not true. Sticks and stones can break your bones and words can hurt you as well. This is why going around and embracing a term such as nigger in this society, this anti-black society, we should at least wonder why our behavior correlates with the definition of that word. So what is the solution for this? We should separate ourselves ideologically. We should embrace values that are our own. Other groups of people in this country, Asians, Latinos, and other groups of people that come here, at home their culture is intact. They use their culture to advance their interests, to gauge their lives, and to see the world through their own lens. We as African people should do the same. We need to separate ourselves from the popular notions of popular culture here in America, from the backwards, deranged Western society, which gives us concepts and ideas that we can't use and utilize. Dr. Wade B. Noble said, "Power is the ability to define reality and then have others use those definitions as if they were their own." This is where we fall short. We are using definitions of other people's reality, and we are using those definitions for our own reality, and it does not match. So we need to do this. We as African people need to pull together. We need to stop relying on outside entities to solve our problems. We need to solve our own problems. And you've heard this before about being unified, but what we should do, honestly, is to unify. We need to unify cooperatively, economically. We need to do this by working hard and striving. We need to pull together. We need to forgive one another. We need to be serious about generations ahead of us, not just our own children, but our children's children. Because right now we are in a critical state as black people in this country. Things are getting worse for us. So we need to begin to rebuild ourselves personally first. Personally, with each individual, we need to take serious note, ask those serious and hard questions, where we need to go from here, what we must do from this point, and begin to apply ourselves to clean ourselves up, to strip ourselves of our vices, to educate ourselves. You don't have to go to a university and get in debt to educate yourself. We're in the information age. You have computers at your fingertips on your phones, but you can purchase books. You can have work study groups. You can study on your own. You can join organizations that works towards liberation, not only liberation of people in the community physically, but mentally. You need to have some type of cooperative economics. These are things we need in order to straighten ourselves up. We need to rely on ourselves. We need to totally separate ideologically, as do other groups. Other groups in their own personal homes and spaces have a culture they rely on. Ideologically speaking, they use this culture to gauge their future. They use this culture to measure their advancements. They use this culture to create objectives and goals in order to advance their interests as a group, not individually. They go out in the world and they blend with everyone else, but when they're home, they're safe, and they use their culture as a cover and a veil to enrich themselves, to reinvigorate their lives. We must do the same. We must realize that much of what we've been doing has not worked and is not working. We must lean on each other. We must turn to ourselves. We must begin to love one another. We must begin to forgive one another. We must also begin to work on ourselves. We must be honest and sincere. We must begin to show our children a way. Those of us who are older, we must join together. We must build all of the bad things and negative things in our lives that are harmful. We must do away with those things. And all of the things, the concepts, the principles, the life habits that are good for us, we need to reinvigorate those. We need to make those stronger. And we need to pass those values along. There is no monochromatic way of doing this. We are different people. We are a beautiful people. We are a harmonious people. What we need to do, though, is unify on a notion of self-determination, of doing for self, of changing our habits, of resuscitating our values, the values of old, of respecting the elders, of respecting one another, of speaking with kindness, of defending the honor of our mothers and our daughters and our brothers and our sisters. These are some of the things we must do to change our current trajectory into the future. If we don't change these things, we will most definitely meet certain death. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.